She walked over to me after announcing her pregnancy, while everyone in the room was cheering. Her smile was sweet as poison when she leaned in and whispered, "Congratulations, Loretta. You're about to raise another one of your husband's children." Welcome, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Share your city below. Let's begin this journey together. Let me tell you how a single lie almost tore down everything we had built. My name is Loretta. I am 68 years old, and for 45 of those blessed years, my husband Walter and I have lived in this house in a historic neighborhood of Atlanta, Georgia. It's a good house with strong bones. Walter worked with wood his whole life, a true craftsman, and even in retirement, he can't keep his hands still. You can always find him in his workshop out back, the smell of sawdust hanging in the air like a promise. Our son, Jamal, is 35, and he is the pride of our life. He's a school psychologist, putting our community's children on the right path. He has a good heart, my boy, a heart he got from his father. 3 years ago, Jamal married Monique. She was 26, a real beauty with a sharp tongue and eyes that always seemed to be calculating something, looking right through you to see what you were worth. The Lord knows, from the very first day, I felt a falseness in that girl, something brittle hiding behind her sugary smile. But Jamal loved her, and a mother learns to hold her peace and pray. We were having a big Sunday dinner after church to celebrate Jamal's birthday. The whole house was filled with the smell of my cooking. Fried chicken crackling in the pan, a big dish of macaroni and cheese with the top all golden and crispy, collard greens simmering with smoked turkey, and my famous sweet potato pie cooling on the counter. It was supposed to be a happy day, a day of celebration for my only child. Monique arrived late, making an entrance as she always did. She was showing off a new Michael Kors handbag, the kind of thing you buy when you're spending money you don't have. She kept one hand on her stomach, stroking it in slow circles, while her eyes kept flicking over to my Walter. Just quick, strange little glances that nobody else seemed to notice, or maybe they just didn't want to. We all sat down at the table, the one Walter built with his own 2 hands. We said grace, thanking the Lord for our food and our family. Then, right in the middle of passing the cornbread, Monique cleared her throat. "I have some wonderful news," she announced, her voice a little too loud in the warm, quiet room. Jamal looked at her, his face full of love. She placed his hand on her belly and smiled that wide, bright smile of hers. "We're going to have a baby." The table erupted. My boy, Jamal, looked like he might just float up to heaven. He was so happy. He jumped up and hugged her, spinning her around. Everyone was cheering and congratulating them. But I couldn't move. I just sat there, my fork halfway to my mouth, a cold dread washing over me. It wasn't joy I felt. It was a premonition, a deep, dark feeling in the pit of my stomach. It was the way she looked at Walter, just for a second, over Jamal's shoulder. It wasn't a look for a father-in-law. It was a look of conspiracy, a look that said, "You and I have a secret." My heart didn't swell with joy. It froze solid. After we finished the pie and Jamal went into the kitchen to help his father with the dishes, Monique made her way over to me. The other guests were chatting on the porch, their laughter drifting in through the open screen door. The house was filled with warmth and love, but a cold front was moving right toward me. She sat down in the chair next to mine, leaning in close, like she was about to share some intimate, woman-to-woman secret about the pregnancy. Her perfume was strong, too sweet. Her breath was hot against my ear as her words, colder than ice, slipped into my soul. "This baby is your husband's, you old fool," she hissed, her voice so low only I could hear the venom in it. Now words like that are meant to knock a woman down. They're meant to shatter her world, to make her scream and cry and tear her hair out. She expected a storm. She wanted a hurricane. She wanted me to run into the kitchen and accuse my husband of 45 years, to destroy my son's birthday, to burn our family to the ground right then and there. But something inside of me, something old and strong, refused to break. I knew my Walter. I knew the man I had laid next to every night for nearly 5 decades, and I knew the snake that was sitting beside me. Instead of crying, I turned my head slowly and looked directly into her eyes. And I laughed. It wasn't a loud laugh, just a soft, quiet chuckle that seemed to surprise her more than a slap in the face ever could. I saw the flicker of confusion, then anger in her gaze. I patted her hand, the one with the perfectly manicured nails. "Bless your heart, child," I said, my voice calm and even. "It'll all work out." That little Southern phrase can mean 1,000 things, and in that moment it meant, "I see you and you have picked the wrong woman to mess with." Monique was furious. I could see it in the tightening of her jaw, the way her smile became a thin, hard line. She had lit a match, expecting an explosion, and all she got was my unshakable calm. She had played her most powerful card, and it had done nothing. She pulled her hand away from mine as if my touch had burned her. Her plan had failed at the first step. She wanted drama, tears, a public scandal that would put Walter in a corner and force him to give her whatever she wanted. All she got was my smile. When Jamal came back into the room, wiping his hands on a dish towel, he saw us sitting there, smiling at each other. His face lit up. "See? I knew you two would finally get along," he said, relief washing over him. My poor boy, he had no idea what kind of viper he had welcomed into our home, into our family. He saw a truce, but I knew I was looking at a declaration of war. That night, long after the guests had left and the house had settled into a deep quiet, I poured 2 cups of chamomile tea. The only sounds were the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall and the hum of the refrigerator. I handed a cup to Walter. He was sitting in his favorite armchair, staring at nothing, his shoulders slumped with a weight I hadn't seen them carry in years. I sat on the ottoman at his feet and waited. I didn't have to ask. He knew. "Tell me everything, Walter," I said softly. His face, usually so full of life and quiet strength, turned ashen. The strong hands that had built our home, that had held me and our son with such tenderness, began to tremble. He set the teacup down on the side table before he spilled it. He looked me in the eye, and I saw a deep well of shame and fear. He reached for the old family Bible on the shelf beside him, the one we'd had since we were first married. He placed his hand on its worn leather cover. "Loretta, I swear on this book and on my love for you and our son, I have never, ever touched that girl." I believed him. I never for a second doubted him. But I knew that wasn't the end of the story. The truth tumbled out of him, a painful, halting confession. For the last few months, Monique had been blackmailing him. It started small. She would come by the house when I was at my weekly ladies' church committee meetings. She'd come in crying, telling him stories about debts she had, medical bills she couldn't pay. She swore him to secrecy, saying she was too embarrassed to tell Jamal that it would make him think less of her. Walter, with his good heart, felt sorry for her. He gave her a little money here and there to help out. He thought he was protecting his son's happiness. But then, her demands grew. When he started to question her, she turned vicious. She threatened to tell Jamal that Walter had been making advances on her, that he had been touching her inappropriately. She knew that in our community, a man's reputation is everything. She knew an accusation like that, even a false one, would be a stain that might never wash out. It would break Jamal's heart and bring shame upon our family, a family that had been respected in our church and our neighborhood for generations. He was trapped. He was scared of what the lie would do to our son. Out of that fear, out of a misguided desire to protect us, he had given her money, again and again. He went to the bank and withdrew it from our savings, the money we had put aside for 45 years, the money we were going to use for that trip to Hawaii we'd always dreamed of. He'd given her almost $15,000. When he finished, a tear rolled down his weathered cheek. He looked broken. I didn't say a word. I just reached out and took his trembling hands in mine. His skin was calloused, but his grip was weak. I held on tight. "It's not your fault," I said, my voice as steady as a rock. "She preyed on your goodness, but this is where it stops." I looked into his eyes, letting him see the strength in mine. "We will handle this. We are a family." And in that moment, he wasn't a victim anymore, and I wasn't just a wife. We were partners. We were a team, and we were going to fight back. I did not sleep that night. Walter eventually drifted off, exhaustion pulling him under, but I sat in the dark of our living room, watching the headlights of the occasional car sweep across the walls. Every tick of the grandfather clock in the hall sounded like a hammer blow. Our home, my sanctuary for 45 years, felt violated. A poison had been released into the air, and I was the only one who knew just how deadly it was. I replayed her words in my head. "This baby is your husband's, you old fool." The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. It was a lie born of pure desperation. I knew I had to think. I had to be smart. Crying and shouting was what she wanted. It's what would give her power. Logic was my only weapon now. Her claim of a pregnancy by Walter was too bold, too easily disproven. In this day and age, everyone knows about DNA tests. A 5-minute swab of the cheek and her whole story would crumble. Monique wasn't stupid. She was cunning. So if she was willing to make such a dangerous accusation, she had to have a plan, another layer to her deceit that I couldn't see yet. She must have believed she had a way to make the lie look convincing, at least for a while, long enough to do the damage she intended. What was her goal? It was always about the money. The $15,000 was just the beginning. This was her end game. A child, supposedly fathered by her husband's father, would be a permanent chain around our necks. It would be a source of shame and secrecy she could exploit for the rest of our lives. She wasn't just trying to rob us of our savings. She was trying to steal our peace, our legacy, our family's good name. By the time the first gray light of dawn filtered through the blinds, my path was clear. I had to move with purpose, and I had to move in secret. I went into the kitchen and made a pot of coffee, the familiar ritual calming my shaking hands. At 7 a.m., I picked up the phone and dialed my sister, Brenda. She's 2 years older than me, the head nurse on the maternity ward at Atlanta General Hospital, and the most no-nonsense woman I know. She answered on the second ring, her voice already crisp and professional. "Loretta? Is everything all right?" she asked. She knew I never called that early, unless something was wrong. "It's about to be, Brenda," I said, keeping my voice low and steady. "I need your help, and please, just for now, don't ask any questions." There was a short pause on the other end of the line. I could picture her standing in her kitchen, already in her scrubs, one eyebrow raised, but she knew my voice. She knew when I was serious. "Sister, for you, anything." "What do you need?" I took a deep breath. "Jamal's wife, Monique. She's telling us she's pregnant. I need you to find out if it's true. I don't mean ask her. I mean, find out for real. Use your channels. Is she a patient anywhere? Has she been to an OB/GYN registered for prenatal care? Anything. I need to know if there is any official medical record of this pregnancy." Brenda was quiet for a long moment. I knew I was asking her to bend the rules, to walk a fine line. "I see," she finally said, her tone serious. "Give me the day. I'll make some calls. I'll find out what I can." "Thank you, Brenda," I whispered. "One more thing," I added, my eyes landing on the memory of Monique clutching that Michael Kors bag to her chest like it held the crown jewels. "I need to get a look inside her purse." Brenda let out a short, sharp laugh. "Loretta, what in the world have you gotten yourself into?" "A fight for my family," I said, "and I plan on winning." She promised to call me back as soon as she knew anything. After I hung up, I felt a sliver of hope. The plan was in motion. The first stone had been cast. Now I just had to watch where the ripples went. Brenda called back that same afternoon, just as I was watering my hydrangeas on the front porch. The sun was hot, but a chill went down my spine when I saw her name on the phone. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. "What did you find?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Brenda didn't waste time with pleasantries. I checked our system at Atlanta General, then I called my counterparts at Grady and Piedmont. Nothing. No patient file for a Monique Johnson under prenatal care. No appointments scheduled, no blood work ordered. As far as the medical system in this county is concerned, your daughter-in-law is not pregnant. The words hung in the air. It was what I had suspected, but hearing it confirmed made my heart pound against my ribs. It was real. The lie was real. "But that's not all," Brenda continued, her voice dropping lower. "I have a friend, Clara, who's been the lead pharmacist at the CVS over on Peachtree for 20 years. I called her on a whim. I asked her if she'd seen Monique lately." I held my breath. "Clara saw her just last week," Brenda said. "She was buying a pregnancy test, one of those expensive digital ones." My mind raced. If she was already pregnant, why buy a test last week? Then Brenda delivered the final blow. "She wasn't alone, Loretta. Clara said she was with a man, a tall, light-skinned fellow with a beard, drove a flashy new Dodge Charger. Clara noticed because they were arguing in the aisle, right there by the cough medicine. She definitely said it wasn't Jamal." A whole new, ugly part of the picture snapped into place, an affair. The baby, if there was a baby, wasn't Jamal's. It wasn't Walter's. It belonged to some other man. This wasn't just a simple shakedown. It was a web of lies so tangled it made my head spin. Monique wasn't just betraying us. She was betraying my son in the most profound way possible. The knowledge settled in my stomach like a lead weight. I thanked Brenda, my voice hoarse, and hung up the phone. I now had confirmation. Monique was weaving a fiction, a dangerous story to explain a pregnancy that my son would soon find out wasn't his. And she was going to lay the blame at my husband's feet to cover her own tracks and get a payday out of it. I started observing her with new eyes, the eyes of an investigator. When she came over a few days later, I watched her every move. She complained about morning sickness, but then ate a huge plate of the spicy jambalaya I'd made. She talked about being tired, but her eyes were sharp and alert, constantly scanning, calculating. I decided to set a small trap. "You know, when I was carrying Jamal," I said, stirring my iced tea, "I had the strangest craving for pickles with peanut butter. Have you had any odd cravings yet, dear?" She hesitated for just a second too long. "Oh, all the time," she said, fanning herself dramatically. "Mostly salty things. Chips, pretzels, you know." It was a generic answer, straight out of a magazine article for expectant mothers. She was performing. Every sigh, every hand placed on her belly was part of a carefully rehearsed play. She was an actress, and we were her unwilling audience. And I knew, more than ever, that I had to find a way to get a look at her script. My chance came, as they so often do, when I least expected it. A week later, Monique stopped by the house unannounced. She said she was on her way to a hair appointment and just wanted to say hello. It was a lie. I knew it. She was checking in, making sure her poison was still working, keeping up the performance. She sat at the kitchen table chattering about baby names while I made a pitcher of lemonade. She left her Michael Kors handbag on the table, right next to the sugar bowl. Then she excused herself. "I just need to use your powder room for a minute," she said with that fake, sweet smile. The moment the bathroom door clicked shut, my heart started hammering. This was it. I knew it was a sin to go through another person's things. I was raised better than that. But I also knew that saving my family from the snake in our house was more important than etiquette. My hands were trembling as I reached for the bag. The leather was soft and expensive. The zipper made a soft metallic sound in the quiet kitchen that sounded as loud as a gunshot to my ears. I pulled it open and peered inside. The first things I saw were the usual contents of a woman's purse. A wallet, a tube of bright red lipstick, a tangle of charging cables, a cloud of perfume. But underneath it all, I found what I was looking for. There were 3 positive pregnancy tests. 3 of them. They were all the same brand, lying side by side like trophies. My first thought was confusion. Why so many? Then I saw it. In her neat, looping handwriting, she had written a different date on each one with a fine-tipped marker. One was dated 4 months ago. The next, 2 months ago. The last one was from last week. The dates made no sense. It was proof. She'd been planning this, collecting her props, building her fraudulent case piece by piece. My blood ran cold. Next to the tests was a small, spiral-bound notebook. I flipped it open. It was a script, a list of symptoms to fake. Under a heading labeled Week 8, she had written, complain about fatigue, talk about back pain, mention feeling nauseous in the morning. Under Week 12, say clothes are getting tight, talk about food cravings, salty. It was all there, a detailed plan for her deception. But the final item at the bottom of the bag was the one that stopped my breath. It was a letter, an official-looking appointment confirmation from a women's health clinic. But the clinic wasn't in Atlanta. It was in Birmingham, Alabama, a 2-hour drive away. The letter confirmed an appointment for Monique Johnson for the following week. It was for a procedure. I didn't understand all the medical terms, but I understood enough. It was an appointment for a pregnancy termination. I felt sick. The whole monstrous picture was now clear. She was pregnant by the man from the CVS, but she never intended to keep the baby. She was going to terminate the pregnancy in another state where no one would know, all while pretending to be pregnant with my son's child and using a lie about my husband to blackmail us. I pulled out my phone, my fingers fumbling with the screen. With shaking hands, I took pictures of everything. The tests with their different dates, the pages of the notebook, the appointment letter from the clinic. The toilet flushed in the bathroom. My time was up. I shoved everything back into the bag, zipped it shut, and placed it exactly where it had been, just as the bathroom door opened. Monique came out, humming a little tune. She gave me a suspicious glance, her eyes narrowing for a fraction of a second. But I was already at the counter, calmly slicing lemons. "Lemonade's ready, dear," I said, my voice impossibly steady. She had no idea that I was now holding the bomb she had built, and I was ready to decide exactly when and where it would go off. When Monique walked out the door, her cheap perfume lingering in the air like a threat, I leaned against the kitchen counter and took a deep, shuddering breath. I had the truth in my hands, captured in the cold, digital light of my phone screen. But the truth is a weapon, and you have to know how and when to use it. Showing it to Walter would only deepen his shame. Confronting Monique alone would give her a chance to twist the story, to run to Jamal with more lies. No, this truth was for my son. He was the one being played for the biggest fool of all. He had to be the one to see it. That same evening, I called Jamal. "Can you come by tomorrow, son?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "Just you. Your father and I want to discuss some financial planning, and we could use your advice." It was a thin excuse, but it was the best I could come up with. I needed him here, on our territory, without her whispering in his ear. "Sure, Mom," he said. I could hear the strain in his voice. He sounded tired, worn down. The lie was taking its toll on him, too. He arrived the next afternoon, right after he finished his work at the school. He walked in and gave me a hug, but it felt distracted, hollow. I saw the dark circles under his eyes, the worry etched into the corners of his mouth. This was not the joyful, expectant father he was supposed to be. This was a man walking on eggshells in his own marriage. We sat out on the screened-in porch, the ceiling fan stirring the humid Georgia air. I gave him a tall glass of sweet tea, and for a few minutes we just sat in silence, listening to the cicadas buzz in the trees. Finally, he was the one who broke the silence. He sighed, a heavy, troubled sound. "Something's not right with Monique, Mom," he admitted, staring into his glass as if the answers were floating in the ice. "She's, I don't know, so secretive." My heart ached for him. I just listened, letting him talk. She won't let me go to a single doctor's appointment with her. She says she wants to handle it herself, that I'm being overbearing. Every time I ask a question about the baby, about her health, she gets angry. She accuses me of not trusting her. He finally looked up at me, his eyes filled with a desperate confusion. Then last night, I was looking for some aspirin in her cosmetic bag. I found a new pack of birth control pills. There were only a few missing. He shook his head, a look of deep hurt on his face. She said they were old, from before we got married, but the expiration date is 2 years from now. Why would she lie about that, Mom? I saw the pain in my boy's eyes, the pain of a good man who wanted so desperately to believe the woman he loved, even when his own gut was screaming that something was terribly wrong. I knew then that the time had come. The ground was prepared. He was ready to hear the truth, even if he didn't know it yet. I reached across the small table and placed my hand over his. His knuckles were white from gripping his glass. "Son," I said, my voice gentle but firm, "what if I told you that Monique isn't pregnant?" He pulled back a little, looking at me like I'd lost my mind. "Mom, what are you talking about? I saw the positive test myself. She showed it to me." It was the reaction I expected. He was holding on to the last piece of the dream he thought he was living. Arguing with him would be pointless. Words could be twisted. A picture cannot. I said nothing more. I simply unlocked my phone, went to my photo gallery, and handed it to him. The first picture he saw was the one of the 3 pregnancy tests, laid out on my kitchen table, each with a different, impossible date, written on it in her own handwriting. He frowned, leaning closer to the screen. I could see the gears turning in his head, the confusion slowly turning into suspicion. "What? Why are the dates different?" he murmured, more to himself than to me. I swiped to the next picture, a close-up of the notebook, her symptom script. He read the words, "Complain about fatigue. Talk about back pain." His expression darkened. Then I showed him the final photograph, the one of the appointment letter from the women's clinic in Birmingham, Alabama. He stared at it for a long, silent moment. He read her name. He read the date for the following week. He read the clinical terms for the procedure. I watched his face change. I saw the precise moment the pieces clicked together in his mind. The shock came first, a widening of his eyes. Then came the dawning, sickening understanding. And finally, a deep, bitter wave of betrayal washed over his features, hardening them into a mask I had never seen before. He looked older, colder. "Mom, why?" His voice was a choked whisper. Why would she make all of this up? That was when I told him everything. I told him about the blackmail, about his father's fear and shame, about the threats she made to ruin his reputation, about the $15,000 she had squeezed out of us, dollar by painful dollar. I explained that this fake pregnancy, this lie about Walter, was her grand finale. It was her final, desperate attempt to secure a permanent hold over us, to bleed us dry for years to come. I told him the whole ugly, heartbreaking story. When I finished, the silence on the porch was thick and heavy. Jamal just sat there, staring at the phone in his hand, at the proof of his wife's monstrous deceit. The hurt in his eyes slowly burned away, replaced by a cold, hard fire. The kind of fire I had only seen in his father's eyes once or twice in our whole marriage. He looked up from the phone and met my gaze. The confusion was gone. The pain was still there, but now it had a purpose. His face was set like stone. "We have to stop her, Mom," he said, his voice low and steady. "She is not going to destroy this family." In that moment, he was no longer a victim. He was my son again, and we were in this together. We spent the next hour on that porch, the sweet tea forgotten, the ice melting in our glasses. We didn't shout. We didn't cry. We planned. We talked through every detail, every possible move she might make, every lie she might tell. We were methodical, piecing together a trap made of her own deceptions. The plan had to be simple, airtight, and it had to happen in a place where she couldn't run, where she couldn't twist the narrative. It had to happen in our home. The following Saturday, Monique was scheduled to come for dinner. It had become a routine, one that now felt sinister. Jamal called her that morning, playing the part of the loving, clueless husband perfectly. He told her I was making her favorite, pot roast, and that he couldn't wait to see her. She fell for it completely. Jamal arrived an hour before she was due, his face grim but resolute. He went out to Walter's workshop, the one at the back of the yard with the door that led directly into the dining room. He would wait there, out of sight, able to hear every word. My Walter was a nervous wreck. His hands trembled so badly he could barely hold his fork steady as he helped me set the table. He kept looking at me, his eyes wide with fear and anticipation. I put my hands on his shoulders and made him look at me. "Walter, you have done nothing wrong," I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. "You were trying to protect your son. Today we protect our family, together, trust me." He nodded, taking a deep, shaky breath. We were a united front. At 6 o'clock sharp, we heard her car pull into the driveway. I smoothed my apron, my heart a steady, heavy drum in my chest. This was it. The performance was about to begin. When Monique walked in, she was radiating that false, pregnant glow she had perfected. She was wearing a loose-fitting dress and smiling from ear to ear, holding the Michael Kors bag like a shield. "Something smells delicious, Loretta," she chirped, kissing the air next to my cheek. "It's your favorite," I said, my own smile feeling tight on my face. We sat down at the dining room table, the three of us. The empty chair where Jamal should have been felt like a judgment. I took a deep breath. It was time to pull the first thread. "Monique, dear," I began, passing her the basket of dinner rolls. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about our little chat, the one we had on Jamal's birthday." She tensed immediately, her smile freezing on her face. The trap was about to be sprung. "About your pregnancy by Walter," I said, my voice as calm and even as if I were commenting on the weather. I slid the butter dish a little closer to her. Monique's eyes darted to Walter, who was staring down at his plate, his knuckles white around his fork. She must have seen his silence as weakness, as guilt. She must have thought I had surrendered, that I was ready to negotiate the terms of our family's shame behind closed doors. A flicker of triumph crossed her face. "Well," she said, choosing her words carefully, a sly smile playing on her lips. "These things can be complicated, Loretta. Life happens." "Oh, I agree," I said, nodding slowly. "Life certainly does happen, and that's why we have to handle this the right way, to be fair to everyone, especially to Jamal." "What do you mean, the right way?" she asked, a new edge of caution in her voice. "I mean proof, of course," said, smiling my sweetest Sunday school smile. "For Jamal's sake, we need to be absolutely sure, so I've made an appointment for a DNA test. It's all arranged. We can go right after dinner. It only takes 5 minutes." The color drained from her face. She jumped to her feet so fast her chair scraped loudly against the wood floor, and she knocked over her glass of sweet tea. The dark liquid spread across my clean white tablecloth like a stain on our family's honor. "No!" she shrieked, her voice high and frantic. "I won't. I'm not going anywhere. A procedure like that could hurt the baby." Her eyes were wide with panic. She was cornered. "Don't you worry your pretty little head about that," I replied, my voice never rising. "I checked with my sister. It's a simple blood test from my arm and a swab from yours. It's 100% safe for the baby." At that exact moment, the door from the workshop swung open. Jamal stepped into the dining room, his arms crossed over his chest, his face a mask of cold fury. He stood there, blocking the only exit. Monique froze, her mouth half open in a silent scream. "Going somewhere, Monique?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Seeing Jamal standing there, his eyes empty of any love for her, Monique's entire facade shattered. The confidence, the arrogance, the slyness, it all evaporated, leaving behind a terrified, cornered animal. She collapsed back into her chair, the fight completely gone out of her. "Jamal, baby, I can explain everything," she stammered, her voice trembling. "Stop," he said. The single word cut through the air like a razor. "Just stop lying. Mom showed me the pictures of the tests. I know about the birth control pills. I know about the appointment at the clinic in Alabama." With every truth he spoke, she seemed to shrink smaller in her chair. In a final, desperate act, she pointed a shaking finger at my husband. "It was him! It was your father!" she cried, tears of pure fiction streaming down her face. "He came on to me. He wouldn't leave me alone. Maybe the baby isn't his, but he harassed me. Be quiet!" Jamal's voice thundered through the room, a sound I had not heard from him since he was a teenager. "We know about the man you were with at the CVS, the one with the beard and the Dodge Charger. We know everything." That was the final blow. There were no more lies for her to hide behind. A terrible, ragged sob broke from her chest, and the whole ugly truth came pouring out. "I'm sorry," she wept, her face buried in her hands. "I owe people, dangerous people. I was in so much debt. I just needed the money." Walter, who had been silent this whole time, finally looked up from his plate. The hurt in his eyes had been replaced by a quiet, burning anger. $15,000, he said, his voice thick with disgust. "You call that just needing money?" I stood up from the table. I was the judge in this room now, and it was time to pass sentence. "Here is what is going to happen," I said, my voice leaving no room for negotiation. "You will go upstairs and you will pack one bag. One. You will leave this house tonight. You will pay back every single dollar that you stole from my husband. And if you ever, for any reason, try to contact or come near anyone in this family again, we will not hesitate to go to the police and show them our evidence." She looked up at me, her face a mess of tears and makeup. The threat of prison was real, and she knew it. She just nodded, unable to speak. Without another word, Monique stumbled from the room. We could hear her footsteps on the stairs, then the sound of drawers opening and closing in a hurry. 10 minutes later, she came back down, carrying a small suitcase instead of her Michael Kors handbag. She wouldn't look at any of us. Jamal walked to the front door and held it open. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, and tossed a $50 bill onto the entryway table. "For gas," he said, his voice flat and empty. "Now get out." She scurried out of the house like a frightened rat, and a moment later, we heard the sound of her car speeding away down the street. The front door clicked shut, and a heavy silence fell over our home. It was finally over. Jamal turned around, and the hard anger on his face crumbled, replaced by a profound and heartbreaking sorrow. He came and wrapped his arms around his father and me, holding on to us tightly. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I'm so sorry I brought her into our lives." We held our boy, comforting him as we had when he was a child who had scraped his knee. "Love can be blind, son," Walter told him, his own voice rough with emotion. "But family is how you learn to see again." Jamal filed for divorce the next week. It was quiet and fast. She didn't fight it. A month later, the first money order arrived in the mail. It was for $50. They kept coming every month, a small, pathetic reminder of the wound she had tried to inflict on us. A year went by, a year of healing. Jamal immersed himself in his work, pouring his heart into helping the children at his school. And then he met Nia. She was a first-grade teacher at his school, a woman with a smile that reached all the way to her eyes and a soul as good and honest as the day is long. They married in our backyard, right under the big oak tree where Jamal used to play as a boy. It wasn't a big, fancy wedding. It was small and simple and filled with more real love than I had ever seen. They were reclaiming the space, washing away the bad memories with new, happy ones. 2 years after that, our real granddaughter was born. They named her Imani. It means faith. Last night, I was rocking her to sleep on the same porch where I told Jamal the truth. I held her tiny, perfect body against my chest, her little hand wrapped around my finger, and I thanked the Lord. I looked out at the quiet street and thought about the storm that had passed through our lives. Sometimes I believe God sends us a storm not to drown us, but to wash us clean. And holding that sweet baby in my arms, I knew our family had never been stronger or more blessed. I'm grateful you spent this time with me. If you've lived through something similar or if my story spoke to you in any way, please share your feelings in the comments. I'd love to hear them. Your stories matter too. If you want more, don't forget to like and subscribe. Be gentle with yourself, and I'll see you in the next story.